Hola mis camaradas, en este episodio vamos a repasar lo que son los FRQs, Free Response Questions, en preparación para el examen de AP Lenguaje. Tal vez están a unos momentitos del examen de AP y es hora de pulir los últimos detallitos. Entonces hoy les voy a compartir unos de los mejores tips and tricks, ¿ok? Para salir con éxito en este examen. Vamos a hablar sobre las dos actividades de hablar, la conversación interpersonal y el discurso de 2 minutos. Y también las dos actividades de escribir, correo electrónico y ensayo argumentativo. Ok, primero vamos a hablar del email reply. It's also called the interpersonal writing. And so AP gives us these instructions in English or Spanish, so I'll be going back and forth just like the test does. This is how the FRQ is going to look when you get that second half of the test started. You'll take the multiple choice, you'll have your break, and then you'll transition to the FRQs. You need pencils and black or blue pens. Okay, don't use another color pen. I would recommend an erasable pen if you have one. Okay, and the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get your packet, and the proctors will kind of walk you through with the timing. So you'll have 15 minutes to read and respond to this email message, and I'll give you a couple tips and tricks with that. You don't need to read the directions because you'll already know what to do, okay? But this is what it looks like, and you see the number 1s at the top. That indicates that this is the first of your 4 FRQs. Okay, so 15 minutes for the email reply. Okay, the interpersonal writing is going to look like this. Okay, so it will be one of our themes, one of the 6 themes. It'll give you a little bit of an introduction, and here is your stimulus that you have to respond to. So I would say take about 2 or 3 minutes to read through this. Underline anything that you need to respond to, and then of course you want to notice the person that you're responding to. Right, in this case is la señora Romero Acevedo. Okay, so that's what that looks like, and I'm going to talk to you about the tips and tricks. They'll give you a test booklet, and you can just write your responses there. Okay, so you have 2 or 3 minutes to read that stimulus and underline and what you exactly need to respond to, and then you want to calculate about 10 minutes to write, and then 2 to 3 minutes to go through and double check anything. Check your spelling mistakes, add a couple accent marks, make sure you asked a question. We'll talk about that in a second. You want a good way to think about this is each question that you respond to is its own little mini párrafo. 2 or 3 sentences is enough, but just separating them so that the reader can find them really easily. You want to use estimado instead of querido, and if it's multiple people, obviously be estimados or estimadas, and give them a title, right? Directora Romero, Señorita Romero, etc. At the end, you're going to sign it off with atentamente or cordialmente. Okay, this all needs to be in the usted form, so something you can do at the end of it is just to take off the S's on your verbs and make sure you didn't use the to form at any point. Everything is left justified. In English, we hit the indent or the tab button. In Spanish, everything is to the left margin. Okay, so know that as you're writing it. Thank them profusely in the beginning and the end. Muchas gracias por incluirme en esta oportunidad. Me encantaría participar. And then say that again at the ending. Nuevamente le agradezco la oportunidad de colaborar con usted, or something like that. Okay, you are required to ask a question as well, and the question should be something about the opportunity they're providing. So you could say something like, ¿cuántas personas más van a participar? ¿Dónde o cuándo serán publicados? ¿Necesitan otros participantes? ¿Podría invitar yo a un amigo? ¿Serán anónimos los resultados? Something like that shows that you're thinking about the opportunity that they're providing. They don't know who you really are, so you can say, I have years of experience participating in community activities or whatever it is they're offering you. Okay, so be creative. And that's basically everything you need to know, last minute tips and tricks. Okay. Correo, so these are the last 3 years worth of examples. The first one from 3 years ago, the topic was un proyecto de colaboración en un periódico estudiantil. So that was pretending you were going to be participating in a collaboration project about the newspaper. Another one 2 years ago was el proyecto del medio ambiente, right? So let's pretend you have 0 experience doing anything for the medio ambiente. Well, you could say, maybe I remember a friend of mine volunteered in the forest preserve and was recolectando basura y reciclando y se involucró en un proyecto de reciclaje. Or I started collecting pilas to be able to recycle them for my family and friends. Okay. Y otro, hace 3 años fue sobre un proyecto del país hispanohablante, cosa que tienen ustedes mucha experiencia en el programa de español. Podrían hablar de una presentación, un proyecto, un PSA, un video, cualquier cosa que hicieron. Ok, so esos fueron los últimos 3 años. Pueden ver que son muy manejables, totalmente fáciles para ustedes que han estado en la clase. Okay, the next writing assignment is, in my opinion, significantly harder, but they're worth the same. So they're weighted the same. So if you don't do as well in the argumentative essay, don't worry because it counts the same as the email reply. Okay, so this is your second assignment, right? So that's why you have the choose up here. And you have the instructions, but again, skip the instructions and go right here to your prompt, okay? It's always going to be a yes or no question where you have to take one side or another. En este caso dice, ¿debería el Estado ser el único responsable de la inversión en el deporte o el sector privado también debe de participar? So you have to choose one or the other, if it's el Estado o el sector privado. Okay, and they're going to give you 3 sources. Their sources are called fuentes. Fuente 1 is the longest one, has the most information. Fuente 2 is always some kind of a graph where it has information you can manipulate to be sí o no. Okay, and then Fuente 3 will be an audio recording. And so as you're reading through these sources, I would recommend looking only for evidence of answering that question. So this is like, oh, sector privado, sector público, right? And just find your evidence so you're using your time, kind of maximizing that time. And Fuente 2, you're going to study it and just help it argue either way, whichever way you're deciding to go. But most likely it's easiest to argue where the evidence is, which is usually Fuente 1. So sometimes your corazón might say one idea, but actually there's evidence on the other idea. So it's easier to argue. Well, I don't know if it's easier. It might be easier to argue where your heart is, but it might be you want to show that you understand the evidence. So in that case, I would argue where the evidence is. Fuente 3, I would draw this little column sí y no. So as you're listening, you're exclusively listening for evidence pro y contra, o sí o no, and taking evidence to that end, and making sure that you take a clear position. Even though thinking through the issue, you could explain the gray areas and how it's both, they really want you, the first most important thing in the rubric is to answer the question with a clear sí or no. So decide which one and back it up with evidence from all 3 sources. Okay, a couple tips and tricks on this one. You have 55 minutes, so program about 10 minutes to read and listen, and that will automatically be played for you. Once you have your evidence, you don't need to keep listening. If it's playing a second time and you don't need it, just go ahead and start writing or planning. Calculate about 35 to 40 minutes for writing and 5 or 10 minutes to revise. Again, looking for accent marks, making sure you use the usted form. Okay, make sure you respond clearly from your thesis statement, right? You don't need to have an introduction. You can just say, el sector privado debe de ser el único, blah, blah, blah. Or los uniformes deben de ser prohibidos en las escuelas. O yo apoyo un uso de una póliza contra el uso del celular en clase. So take a clear position. That can be your introduction in and of itself. Just one thesis statement. Okay, the second most important thing, according to the rubric, is to show that you understood each of the sources. Okay, so demuestra tu entendimiento de fuente 1, 2, y 3. We talked about that. I would say, and the easiest way to structure this is just using each fuente in its own little paragraph. You could combine 2 fuentes in one paragraph as well. But you don't need to have a long introductory paragraph. You just need one thesis statement, and then you can have 2 or 3 body paragraphs with each of the sources. You don't need to quote them. You don't have to say, según el artículo escrito por María Alejandra, blah, blah, blah. No, you can just say, según fuente 1, fuente 2 nos marca o nos matiza, nos señala, right? You don't have to say more than that. And you can use direct quotes if it supports your argument, but they're not necessary. You can also just paraphrase. Okay, don't forget your transitions in every paragraph. Para empezar, además, otro punto, continuando, right? And then para concluir. So at the beginning of each paragraph, check off at the end to make sure you have 4 or 5 transiciones and within your paragraphs as well. And then start with your strongest evidence. If Fuente 3 is your strongest evidence and you can add some opinion in to follow up on that or personal experience, then definitely have that be your first point. So you don't have to respond with the fuentes in order. But again, you do want to show your understanding of all three. You cannot get a 4 or 5 if you only use 2 sources. So if you only use 2 sources, the maximum you can get is a 3. Incluye tu opinión y experiencia propia, right? You can just say, yo he visto en mi propia vida, right? And explain some personal details. A little bit of that goes a long way. You don't need to do more than 1 or 2 times of that. And the conclusion, if you're running out of time, just restate your thesis. You don't have to be fancy and offer some new suggestion or insight. You can just restate your thesis in other words. Okay, so that's what the presentational writing looks like. So again, 55 minutes. It's going to feel rushed. You want to make sure you get started right away. Make sure you're answering that question and using all 3 of the sources. Okay, if there's time left over, again, you go through. First pass, transition words. Second pass, a few accent marks. Third pass, make sure you have fuentes 1, 2, y 3 in there. Okay, we're going to move on to the speaking. So we have the 2 writings. Well done. Take a breather. Let's move on to, oh no, just kidding. Okay, these were the last 3 years worth of presentational writing prompts. ¿Quién se beneficia más? Las personas que hacen el trabajo voluntario o los que reciben la ayuda. Okay, ¿se deben usar uniformes en la escuela o no? And, they all have been vida contemporánea. Okay, y es la capacidad intelectual el factor más importante en el desarrollo, el éxito académico. So those have been the last 3. So again, they're always yes or no questions. You're taking a clear posición de que sí o no, okay, or one or the other. So taking notes and looking for evidence for that. Okay, and that's it for writing. Again, now we finished, we breathe, we let our hand rest, shake it out, and then we transition to the speaking part. And this is significantly shorter. You see, it's only 18 minutes. Here's the instructions. We're not going to need them. We're going to go right ahead. They give them to us twice, and in English and in Spanish. Okay, so this just tells us now you're in the speaking section. You're going to be using your iPad, and so you want to make sure that you speak directly into the microphone. You don't want to be the person who's whispering like this, right? Because then the reader is listening, and they're struggling, and they're kind of getting in a bad mood, and they can't really hear you. You want to make sure all your really good ideas are heard. So make sure you speak directly into the microphone. Okay, this is again, there's 2 tasks here. In my opinion, the conversation's a little bit easier. And then the second one is the 2-minute speech. So let's talk about those. Okay, the interpersonal speaking, you're responding 5 times in 20 seconds each. Okay, so again, you go right to the prompt. We'll look at an example of that in a minute. Once they tell you the prompt, make a list of all the words that could possibly be associated. If it says your friend Marisol is calling you to talk to you about a party, then you're going to activar todo el vocabulario sobre una fiesta, sobre comida, globos, música, mariachi, bailes, DJ, etc. Si te dice que vas a hacer voluntariado, puedes decir feed my starving children, recolectar cosas, tutoría, all the things you could do as a volunteer. So start activating and having all that vocabulary ready. Have your saludo y despedida and try to be natural and have it be a little bit longer than hola o adiós. Okay, something like, ¿Qué tal, Marisol? Qué gusto verte aquí. No sabía que te gustaba el arte, or wherever you're supposed to be in the context. Okay, and then for your despedida, it could be something like, bueno, muchas gracias. Me ha dado mucho gusto encontrarte aquí. Saludos a tu familia. Que estés muy bien y ojalá nos veamos pronto. Look I just took 15 seconds, right? So just giving a very natural and a little bit more of an elaborate saludo y despedida. We're going to fill up that 20 seconds, no problem. Okay, follow the script carefully. Sometimes the script will say, responde negativamente. That means you have to say no very politely. We'll talk about that in a second. Or it might say, acepta la invitación y hazle una pregunta. So make sure you acepta la invitación y haces una pregunta, right? So follow the script. A lot of times my heritage speakers, they just get into it and go with the flow and they lose track of what they're supposed to say on the script. And that's where you can lose points. So you want to make sure that you actually respond with the points that it's asking you to. If you get off task or distracted or you don't understand, you're not going to freak out because you only get 1 attempt. So you just be like, disculpa, regresando a tu pregunta, perdón, no te escuché, pero lo que te quería compartir era, and just switch it up and respond with something else. Give yourself permission to make a mistake. Okay, remember, culturally appropriate, it's rude in Spanish if someone offers us anything, an invitation, un pedazo de pastel, to come over to eat. Someone's mom is like, here, you want to have something to eat? You can just say gracias. Déjame ver, parece que tengo un compromiso. Parece que tengo un conflicto ese día, right? And that will show your cultural knowledge as well. So if it says responde negativamente, kind of a trick question, because that's what they really want you to do. Remember, you can be anyone you want to be in the moment. You're not being videoed. It's only your voice. So no one knows what you look like or who you are even. So if they're like, do you know anything about art? And let's say you know nothing, you can just totally lie and say, you know what, sí, he ido al Museo de Arte aquí en Chicago cuántas veces. Me encantan las esculturas y las pinturas y los bosquetos and all this stuff. Right? So you just be whoever you need to be. If they say they're inviting you to una escuela de surf, that was one of the email prompts a couple years ago. So then, of course, yo crecí en California, toda la vida he estado surfeando. Mi familia, somos una familia de surfeadores. Hacemos competencias in Hawaii, whatever you need to say, right? Just make, you can do whatever you need to do to get that conversation accomplished. Okay, again, volumen, confianza, creatividad. There's many people talking around you, right? And they might be quieter than you, and don't let that detenerte de hablar con voz fuerte, right? Speak strong into that microphone, loud and proud. And no repetirse. Don't repeat the same points. Don't repeat what people are saying around you. Don't wait till so-and-so says their response and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to send mine, right? So say whatever is authentically yours, because we can hear, as AP readers, we hear when you pick up what somebody else is saying and just restate that. And that actually gets reported as cheating. Okay, and then you do want to speak. It's going to beep you after 20 seconds. And even when it beeps, speak through the beep, right? Even just finish your point, right? Finish your sentence. Don't go seconds and seconds after. But if it's 2 or 3 seconds, go ahead and finish your idea. Because usually it does continue to record the whole time, depending on how the proctor is doing it. And don't stop. If your neighbors stop talking, you keep talking, okay? Because they ran out of things to say, but you're going to be full of ideas. So don't let that be you. Last thing about this, let's say the first 2 you really didn't answer well. Even if you answer well in the last 3, that's preponderance of evidence, and that means you can still get the majority, and that means you can still get a 3 or 4, even not answering 2 questions, okay? So you're still in the game, even if you have 2 questions totally wrong. Even if you don't understand what they're saying, you have your list of vocabulary. You're going to access that and speak about something similar or related to what they asked you in the first question or in the overall prompt. Does that make sense? Okay, next and last speaking. Oh, here's an example. Just kidding. Okay, so here it says, esta es una conversación con Miguel, un amigo del colegio. Vas a participar en esta conversación porque Miguel te conoce bien y espera que le des algunos consejos relacionados con sus obligaciones en casa y planes de trabajo. Okay, so here's amigo de colegio, friend from school, not necessarily college, because colegio means school. So you're going to get ready some consejos about obligaciones en casa. So I'm going to make a list of mis quehaceres, ayudo a mis papás, lavo los platos, les ayudo a pagar los biles en línea. Estoy haciendo mi currículum para poder trabajar. Actualmente trabajo sábados y domingos, un tiempo parcial. All these words are things I'm writing out. Okay, and in that 2 minutes that you have to plan, the 1 minute's instructions, you're not going to need them. You jump right into this and start planning. Okay, so here, respondo y explico por qué. So I'm going to write the number 2 right here so I remember. Contesta dando detalles, responde la pregunta con elaboración y al final ofrezco una sugerencia y obviamente me voy a despedir aquí también, right? So sneak that in as well. So I'm giving a lot of sugerencias y elaboración. If you know your grammar, you could definitely use your subjunctive in here to show off. Okay, so it's 1 and done, 5 answers, 20 seconds each. And we only get 1 time, so we're going to do our best with it. And if we make a mistake, we just redirect. Disculpa, regresando a mi punto. Perdóname, Miguel. Estaba yo muy distraído con esta estudiante al lado, right? Just be natural and go with that. Okay, let's look at the topics from the last couple years. Last year, ayuda a planear vacaciones en Estados Unidos, right? So here I'm writing parques nacionales, tren, road trip, right? Viaje en coche, monumentos, al oeste, right? Or Nueva York. I'm thinking of places to see in the United States. Okay, hace 2 años fue que estás organizando una celebración familiar. So there we go, all our party words that we talked about before. Belleza y estética, una fiesta de cine. Por ejemplo, right, festival de cine, películas de romance, películas de terror, películas dramáticas, películas de caricatura para niños, all that, right? So, thinking palomitas, have all that vocabulary ready in the time that you're sitting there waiting. Okay, so here's the last and the best. So that was conversación. We're now in our fourth and last. We're so tired, but we have the hardest task at the end, posiblemente, right? So this last one is our 2-minute speech, also called presentational speaking. Okay, so aquí nos da el tema, right? And this is actually the long question. The first part of it is what we really need to pay attention to. ¿Cómo afecta la globalización, la conexión entre las diferentes regiones del mundo, que da como resultado el aumento de las interacciones internacionales, culturales, económicas y políticas, a las personas en una comunidad del mundo hispanohablante que te sea familiar? Compara el efecto que te sea familiar con otra comunidad. So here we're comparing and contrasting. In my view, the easiest way to do this is compare the non-Latino community with the Latino community. O sea, the larger United States with Latin American communities. So let's take a look at that. So in this case, era el tema de la globalización. This one is a hard one, right? So I would just use these subpoints here, right? Interacciones internacionales, something like NAFTA. Culturales, something about mercancía que se vende de los dos lados. Económicas, that could be NAFTA too, right? Y políticas, how our presidents can be friends, right? So whatever I happen to know more about, I would choose two and make those my points. Okay, we have a minute to read this instructions, 4 minutes to plan and 2 minutes to speak. So since we already know how to do this, 4 plus 1 is 5. We're going to jump right into planning. We have 5 minutes. I'm drawing my Venn diagram. I'm putting my 2 or 3 points here. I'm getting my transition words ready. I'm going to write out my thesis statement. So I'm ready with that. A nice long thesis statement shows the listener that I know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to stick to my roadmap, right? And it also takes a good 20 seconds. So we'll be able to kill a bunch of the 2 minutes in there, right? Okay, so we said we're going to skip the directions. Make sure when we're answering the prompts, we're not just talking about, in this case, it was globalización, but el impacto, right? Who is it affecting? If afecta a, right, los gobiernos o la gente, a los jóvenes, a los grandes, right? Be very specific about if that word is there, that's essential. Because if you don't cover this, then you're probably going to be in the 2s and 3s because you're not technically answering the question. Okay, decide what your 2 or 3 points are and put those in your thesis. Okay, here's an example of a thesis and the way you can launch this. Hola camaradas, les saludo desde Chicago. En este discurso vamos a comparar la globalización en mi comunidad de Chicago con comunidades de Latinoamérica. Mis 3 puntos van a ser la economía. ¿Qué más dijimos? La economía, los gobiernos, and something else. Primero, vamos a empezar con el punto de la economía, right? And I start my first point. I'm going to use whatever point I'm able to talk about both cultures with. Okay, start with my best point and go back and forth, kind of zigzag between United States, Latino cultures, and perhaps something in the middle, or starting here and then branching out. Start with my strongest point, so I have el lujo de tiempo para poder expresarme todas mis ideas. Okay, zigzag back and forth, so I talk about both. And have my transitions handy. I want to use at least 3. Para empezar, además, if I'm comparing and contrasting, we got the old no obstante, sin embargo, por el otro lado, en cambio, right? And al final, para concluir. Okay. Some things when they're talking about really getting to the non-surface level cultural things that they really want to hear from you is talking about some of those cultural constructions that are really different, como concebimos el tiempo y los horarios, right? Para los gringos tienes que llegar temprano. Si llegas a tiempo, básicamente estás llegando tarde y ya no hay lugar, right? Y para los latinoamericanos, si llegas a tiempo, vas a ser el único, right? Todos llegan un poco más tarde. Entonces, eso habla sobre la importancia de las cosas, right? Para los latinos, el terminar el momento que estamos teniendo con alguien, preservar esa amistad es más importante que llegar a tiempo, right? Y para los gringos, el tiempo es dinero y en Estados Unidos el dinero es todo, right? Everything revolves around money in our economy. So, time and money are really two key topics where we can see the cultural differences. No matter what topic they give us, we can come back to that. We can also look at familia y relaciones, right? Family and relaciones humanas y personales y amistades son lo más importante en la cultura latina, mientras aquí en Estados Unidos lo más importante es el dinero. Trabajamos en los días festivos porque no queremos dejar de ganar dinero, right? We work and we sell, right? And all of the merchandising and marketing and branding and our dress reflects the importance of showing money and status symbols and our big cars and our big plates, all that, right? Versus other countries where that's not as important because it's not about the economy. It's more about just good relationships and family priorities, right? Otro punto que pueden tocar, and being careful with this, is recursos, right? En Estados Unidos tenemos muchos recursos. No todos Estados Unidos, right? There's some exceptions. Pero en Latinoamérica, obviamente, hay comunidades más, we're going to call them subdesarrolladas, right? Not poor, but subdesarrolladas, where maybe in some rural areas no hay acceso a internet, los estudiantes no van a tener tabletas, y cosas así, donde podemos ver diferencias de recursos en diferentes temas, right? Whether we're talking about tecnología o ciencia o educación o ropa, etc. Okay. At some point, you might be like, where am I? I'm talking and I made a big mistake. I'm off on a tangent. And you just rein yourself back in. You're watching that clock. Disculpa. Continuando con mi siguiente punto, o regresando a mi punto. Okay, and lastly, your experiences are all valid and true. Maybe they're not true for everybody. Maybe it sounds like we're stereotyping in a little bit. But if they're true in your experience and you just say, en mi propia experiencia, yo he visto, tengo amigos que, conozco a familia que, and that's all part of the story. So make sure you include any of those personal experiences that you have. And again with the beep. Once it beeps, you need to finish your point, finish your sentence. If you have a couple words left, it will still record that. And don't stop until you hear the beep, right? Some people around you, maybe they ran out of ideas, they didn't plan really well. You're going to plan heartily and have at least 3 points to talk about, and make sure you have a nice long introduction and conclusion that will fill up that time. So just because someone around you stopped doesn't mean it's over. It's not over until you hear the beep, end of conversation, end of speaking, right? So you just keep going, even if you're the last man or woman standing. Okay, the last couple years, these were the examples. ¿Cómo afectan los horarios de las comidas? Okay, so this is an easy one, right? We talk about the siesta and the importance of going home and being with family in the middle of the day, whereas that would never happen in the United States. La importancia de las salidas con amigos, right? And you can talk about how in Latin America you can be spontaneous and just show up at someone's house, versus United States, people kind of expect to plan a little bit more in advance. Okay, and then los hábitos ecológicos, reciclaje y reusar las cosas y restricción de agua y gas y todo eso. Ok, amigos, hemos llegado al final de FRQ. Hablé muy rápido, pero pues tal vez pudieron adelantar o repetir lo que les sirvió más. Gracias por escuchar. Yo sé que van a salir súper bien. Cualquier cosa, believe in yourself. You guys can do this. You've prepared for this, and it's showtime. So good luck. Signing out here, Ms. Castro. Reach out if you need anything else. Have a great testing session.